We are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for being here with me today. Just a couple housekeeping things before we get started. First of all, my name is Erica Collins. I'm a health educator here at Providence Community Wellness. I'll be spending the next hour here with me today. I do ask that you keep your mic and video off. But we will be utilizing the chat feature here today, so feel free to put any and all different ideas. I've got some questions here. Feel free to put your responses there in the chat. We've also got a Q&A function, so if you have any questions that come up, feel free to also put it in the Q&A as well, and I'll try and make sure to get to all of your questions that you put, not only in the chat or in the Q&A as well. And we've set aside some time to answer all of those questions there for you, either in the Q&A or in the chat. We will be recording this session and sending out the recording in the next week or so you'll be able to review this on your own time, and we'll send out some resources in that email with the link as well for you to review on your own time. With that, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, just kind of a high-level agenda, what we'll be talking about today, why mental health matters, why it's important, why we're even here talking about it today, signs and symptoms of mental health challenges. We'll be talking about our 5-step algae action plan and what that looks like to actually put it into practice. And then we'll talk a little bit about first-person language, what that is, and why it's important that we talk about first-person language as well. So first of all, why is mental health important? Why are we even here talking about it today? I'm going to ask, can you put it in the chat? Why do you think mental health is important? Why are we even here talking about mental health? Why is it important?
It's something that can gear our lives in certain directions if we have a clear mental understanding of what's going on, or how we interpret situations, understand situations, and how we process those and go forward.
Absolutely, thank you. We've got in the chat as well. It's an essential part of our overall health, right? We think so much about our physical health, but it's so important that we take care of our mental health as well. So first of all, also mental health problems are common. In fact, 1 in 5 Americans will experience a mental illness in a given year. Yep, we've got in the chat. It affects everything else. It kind of compounds into the different parts of our lives. Specifically holiday stress, right? We've just come back from the holidays. Holiday stress can absolutely take a toll on your mental health, leading to increased anxiety, depression, feeling overwhelmed. A study specifically by the American Physiological Association found that 38% of people reported that the holidays caused them more stress and more anxiety. And this stress can even continue after the holidays, especially since COVID hit since 2020. So many more people have reported burnout since the pandemic. It really is such an integral and huge part of our lives. And also many people are not well informed about how to help. How do we even get that help that we need? And most people often don't know how to respond to a mental health challenge if someone is experiencing a mental health challenge. There's a lot of stigma still associated with mental health challenges. And people with mental health challenges often do not seek help, or if they try and seek help, maybe they're not aware of different resources that might actually be available to them. It's so important that we're here talking about this today. So let's talk first about some signs and symptoms. We, as observers, can observe changes in a person's appearance, their behaviors, their thoughts, their feelings. Specifically for ourselves, we may or may not notice these changes quite as easily in ourselves. It tends to be easier to notice changes in other people, but not so much ourselves. So setting some time aside to reflect, do some self-reflection, maybe do a self-check-in with yourself. How are we feeling? It might be helpful as well. Some early and worsening signs and symptoms. Maybe it's looking tired, disheveled, paying less attention to our personal hygiene. Maybe we have difficulty concentrating at home, at school, or at work. Some indecisiveness. Maybe you're not enjoying work or the activities or hobbies that you used to enjoy. Sadness, worry, rage, withdrawing from family, withdrawing from friends. And absenteeism or presenteeism. Presenteeism is being present, but not being productive while you're working. So you're there, but you're not really there. Maybe it's odd or erratic behavior, increasing self-blame, self-criticism, any of those. Also thinking about crisis signs as well. It could be difficulty breathing, drug or alcohol misuse, overdosing on drugs or alcohol, acting recklessly or engaging in risky behavior, threatening to hurt or kill themselves or others, hopelessness, dramatic changes in mood, feeling trapped like there's no way out. So many different signs and symptoms that we can compare. So if we think about, we're aware of these signs and symptoms, but when do they become a challenge for someone or for ourselves? They can become a challenge if there is a major change in a person's thinking, feeling, acting, or if this change interferes with the person's ability to live their life. So thinking about from baseline, where are we typically at baseline, and where are we at now? How has that changed, and how is that interfering with our life? Or also, finally, if the interference does not go away quickly and last longer than typical emotions or reactions would be expected to. So it is very valid to be feeling a certain type of way about something, but it can become that challenge if maybe it's lasting longer than than what a typical emotion would for that instance. So that you might say, well, Erica, this is all well and great. I can notice signs and symptoms all day long, but what do I do about it? How do I put it into practice? How can I actually help someone or do things for myself when I'm actually noticing these signs and symptoms? And that is where our algae action plan comes in handy. Go to part. This is our algae action plan. Hopefully you can see it here up on the screen. Algae stands for A, it's assess. So we assess an approach for risk of suicide or harm, and we assist them. L is for listening non-judgmentally. G is giving reassurance and information. We've got 2 E's, the first one being encourage appropriate professional help, and the second one being encouraging self-help and other support strategies. So I'm going to put this here in the chat, so hopefully we've all got it here written down. The biggest thing that I want to point out here is it's non-linear. I'm going to talk about this in the order that you see it here on your screen, but that doesn't mean that in practice we have to do it in this exact order. You'll notice this algae, it can also spell eagle, for example. It could spell ale or glee. We don't have to use all of these steps, and we don't have to use them in this order. You don't have to say, oh, I can't encourage you until I've given you reassurance, right? Non-linear, I'm just going to go through it in this order that you'll see here. Right. So this first A, this A is approach and assess. Specifically on your slide, you'll see assessing for risk of suicide or harm, but we are assessing for any crisis, not just for the risk of suicide or harm. So if you think about, especially if, most of us are here in Spokane or in the close vicinity, it's been snowing recently. Think about when you're driving. When you are driving, you are looking at the front of the road, assessing for safety in front of you, checking for people walking around. Now it's snowing. Are we checking our tires? Are we sliding? Are we going extra slow? We're constantly assessing our rear view mirrors or side mirrors, always assessing to ensure safety. Just in the same way, we're doing this here. We are always assessing the situation to ensure safety of everyone involved. That's ourselves, but also everyone else that's involved as well. We're assessing really for lots of different crises or potential crises. The things that may become a crisis could be a panic attack, aggressive behaviors, substance misuse, following a traumatic event, non-suicidal self-injury. And then also looking for immediate crises as well. It could be a medical emergency, suicidal thoughts and behaviors, severe effects of alcohol or drug use, a substance use crisis, and finally severe psychotic. So we've done our assessment. We're making sure that everyone is being safe, not only ourselves, but those around us. Then we can step into our approach. We really want to approach this person. So a couple things to keep in mind as we're doing our approach here. First of all, we want to talk privately about your concern. So maybe we've noticed something, we don't want to do it in the middle of a large office setting, or if there's lots of people around, right, might not feel as comfortable sharing. So planning to talk privately about your concerns. Then be aware that a person might not open up to you until they're sure that you care. So really making sure that you're taking that time to really show, I really care, I really want to hear what you have to say. Third on here, a person might downplay what they're going through to avoid upsetting you, or might not even recognize that there's a problem. You might have noticed some signs and symptoms, but they might not recognize that there is a problem developing. I know, for example, there's been times people might come to you and say, hey, I've noticed X, Y, Z. You had no idea, right, that that was even going on. And so they might not even recognize that there's a challenge developing there. Then we don't want to put pressure on them to talk right away. We never want to pressure them, rather reassuring them that you will be available to speak with them whenever they are ready and feel comfortable to share. And then finally, using I statements. I have noticed this, or I am concerned about you, really coming from that place of genuine curiosity and really wanting to genuinely care for this person. So some examples of some approaches, again, might be, I'm concerned about you, or maybe, hey, you haven't been joining us at coffee, are you doing okay? Or, maybe they do open up. They say, it's hard for me to understand exactly what you're going through, but I can really see that that's distressing for you. Or, hey, let's go get a cup of tea and talk about this. Or, do you want to talk about it? That's a question. Really open up that conversation. And this applies not only as we approach other people, but to ourselves as well. I really hope that you are able to talk to others to whatever extent you feel comfortable with, and reaching out and having that conversation, starting that conversation is a really great step. So we've done our A, that first part of our ALGE action plan. Next one here is listening non-judgmentally. So I want you to put in the chat, how do you know when you are talking to someone, how do you know that they're listening to you? When they make eye contact, right? So maybe they're not looking down at their phone, they're looking at you and really giving you that time. Nice. How else do we know when people are listening to you? Yeah, great. They're nodding their heads, so maybe giving some of those nonverbal cues, but they're showing that they're listening. They aren't talking, so they're giving you that space to have that time to talk yourself and kind of work through what you're saying. Great. Any other ideas? How do we know when people are listening to us? We've got hands are not in pockets. All right, so really, again, not distracted maybe with our hands, but really giving you that focus. Nice. And we've got rephrasing. Yeah, so they're repeating back to you exactly what they're understanding. So they're saying, basically, I acknowledge what you were saying, and I'm repeating it back to you to show that I heard and hearing what you're saying. Nice. Let's do the flip side of that. How do we know when they're not listening to you? Yeah, active listening. They ask permission to ask a question. Yep, so that's listening. Awesome. Let's do the flip side of that. How do we know when they're not listening to you? A defensive posture. Yeah, so that nonverbal really plays a big tell here, right? They're telling their own biography, so they're telling their own story. Absolutely. We've got one in the chat here. When they are not listening, they're prone to look down, away, or otherwise close themselves off. Absolutely. Trying to multitask. Yeah, how often if you're talking to someone and they're over here working and over here working, do you really think that they're paying attention to you? Probably not so much. If we've got writing, typing, working while you're speaking to them. Got rolling eyes, giving some deep breaths. Maybe you can, again, hear some of those nonverbal cues. Awesome. Nice. Talking back or maybe talking over you. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, listening non-judgmentally is huge, right? Can really help someone feel heard, feel understood, feel acknowledged even in that moment that they're just, being heard. So a couple ideas here. Before we engage in a conversation with someone else, asking yourself, first of all, are we prepared to express concern without judgment? And we've got in the chat there, the rolling eyes, the deep breaths, are we prepared to not do that and really listen without judgment? Second of all, are we really the best person to help this person? Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. Maybe we don't have the best relationship and it's going to someone else. who is the more appropriate person to have that conversation. And then finally, can you invest the appropriate amount of time in a conversation right now? We don't want to open up that conversation and then say, oh, sorry, I've got work, or, I've got to do that multitasking activity. So really taking the time to be there to listen to that person. We had a couple verbal and nonverbal cues ideas in the chat there. Verbal cues are the things that we say. They can be questions like, how are you feeling? How long have you been feeling this way? They can be some encouraging sounds to show that you're listening as well, or repeating back, just like we put in the chat. We want to use those sparingly, enough to show that we're listening, but not so much that they can't fit in what they want to say. And then we've got non-verbal cues as well. These are the things that we do with our face and our body to communicate listening or non-listening. Got great examples of that in the chat. That could be our volume, our tone of voice, our body language, our posture, our facial expressions, gestures. This can be both in person or virtually even as well. You can still see some of those nonverbal cues. But a couple nonverbal cues that I really want to point out and take some time to highlight here. First of all, being silence. Silence is a very, very powerful nonverbal cue. Silence is really important. It can give, it can really help that person gather their thoughts, figure out what they want to say, let them, kind of be present in that conversation. And also remembering. Remembering is also a really important way that we can show non-judgmental listening. If someone opens up to you and then we forget what they say the next day, well, maybe we might not feel comfortable opening up to you again. So trying to remember the things that they're saying so they will feel comfortable again opening up to you maybe at a later time. So that's our L of our LG action plan. The next one being G. G is giving reassurance and information. Reassurance is that statement, that comment or action that can help remove someone's fears, whereas the information can help them kind of understand a concept, discuss options, next steps, give them different ideas in whatever way that they need that additional help or support. We like to think about this as hope with facts. So you're giving some hope with that reassurance, but some facts with that information. So I want you to think about maybe a time where you felt reassured by someone. And without giving context to the situation, let's put in the chat, what has someone said to you where you really felt reassured? Or maybe what did they do? What did they say, but you really felt reassured in that moment? We've got someone in the chat here saying they rephrased what I said and then cited some scenario where it really made me feel heard and understood. So they did part of that listening too. They told, kind of rephrased what you had said. Awesome. And we've got some wonderful comments in here. No matter what happens, you are loved. Awesome. For me, it was, I'm here and I will be here as long as you need me to be. That's awesome. So it's not only support in that moment, but long-term support. Awesome. Job well done. Great. I appreciate you sharing your feelings with me. It's a huge one, really validating. Thank you for even just sharing. That's still so reassuring. Awesome. Saying I'm with you. That's awesome. Great. Yes. So giving that reassurance and information and thinking about how powerful it is when you're given that reassurance, how we can give it to others as well. Awesome. I'm going to give you some examples of what it does not sound like as compared to what maybe it does sound like. So for example, it does not sound like, oh, I remember during my breakup, I just threw myself into work. What you should do is this. Whereas it does sound like breakups can be tough. It's natural for you to feel hurt and upset. Does not sound like you really need to talk to a professional about that. Maybe it does sound like I'm here for you if you want to talk. There are also people who are trained to help you work through these feelings. Does not sound like, oh, you'll get over it. Relax. Just don't worry about it. Does sound like you are not alone. Does not sound like the way you're handling this really isn't helping. Does sound like I care about you and I've noticed a change in your mood or your habits, etc. I'm hoping that when I say some of these statements, you notice the differences, even with my tone of voice. I feel very, even when I say that, I'm feeling very judgmental. I'm feeling very not open and not opening that conversation with that left side that does not sound like, or even my tone of voice seems to shift, but that does sound like. Another example here, maybe it's saying, for some individuals who experience loss, they talk to their family, they talk to their friends. For others, they consider talking to a counselor. And for you, it's important to find what works best, and I'm here to support you in that, whatever that might be. The different ways that we can give reassurance and information. All right, then after our G, we've got our 2 E's of our algae action plan. Does anyone remember, let's put in the chat, does anyone remember our final 2 E's of our algae action plan? What do they stand for? You can put those in the chat. Putting you on the spot here. We just talked about it. Encourage, awesome. You're paying attention, awesome. Great, so that first E is encouraging appropriate professional help. Now, when I say professional help, what comes to mind? Who comes to mind? Let's put that in the chat. When I say appropriate professional help, who do you think of? Someone's putting her a therapist, a licensed therapist, clergy, Lyra, absolutely, nice. Who else, when I say professional help, what comes to mind? Okay, we've got support groups, a psychiatrist, great ideas come in. LGE, maybe a priest, okay, who else? Any other ideas for professional help? There's lots of options out there. Absolutely, maybe it's a family doctor, your primary care, definitely, awesome. Nice. You were all absolutely right. Yep, we've got a psychiatrist in there. Yep, there's a wide variety of who this could be and who falls into this category. That could be medical doctors like you talked about. So the psychiatrist, your primary care physician, it could be psychologists, could be social workers even. There are individual social workers, there's family social workers, could be counselors, therapists, advanced practitioners, even like an NP or a PA, crisis support specialists also fall under this criteria. Certified peer specialists, those are awesome. Those are people who have lived experiences with different mental health challenges, but then they've been trained to help other people go through those. So that's a great option. So many different options for professional help here. A couple things I like to point out with this is the sooner that help is received, the better the outcome is for the individual, for ourselves or anyone else that we're encouraging professional help for. We really want to do this sooner rather than later. Again, the better the outcome will be for that person. A person is also much more likely to seek help if someone close to them is the one suggesting it. So being, family or friends, and hoping that we're feeling comfortable enough that we can talk with others and suggest different kinds of professional help, as people are much more likely to take those ideas into consideration if we're, have that established relationship with that person. And when we are talking about encouraging appropriate professional help, the items might come up. Maybe it's stigma or cost or access. Maybe it's transportation. We're not able to get to those appointments. So what does that look like? Are there options for that? And then even for coworkers and family members, I would really encourage utilization of the EAP, that's the Employee Assistance Program. Specifically, like here, I work for Providence. Someone had mentioned in the chat that Lyra. So Lyra is a great option for Providence provide employers or caregivers. And that translates not only to you, but to your spouse or significant other as well. And so it's not only free services for you. And I know other companies do that as well. And then again, even for ourselves, taking whatever steps to get the support that we need. We don't need approval from others. We don't need approval from our partner or family or friends. Like, we need to seek those resources. I hope that we feel comfortable enough to get the help that we need for that. Another example, and I will actually type this in the chat here, is Psychology Today. us. Another resource there as well where you can look up different mental health providers. You can search specifically in this area, whether we're coming from Spokane or if we're, you know, outside of Spokane as well. You can look there. They will have some descriptions of each person so you can kind of choose, make an idea of who might be the best fit for you. And also do some Googling for different resources that maybe are more specific to the background or culturally informed on your ethnicity or race or chronic illness or neurodiversity. There's a lot of different resources out there, kind of depending on your needs and your wants. So feel free as I kind of go along with the rest of this presentation today to put in more resources in the chat, and hopefully at the very least, if we get one person that finds a resource that they didn't know about, then that's going to be a win in my book from our presentation here today. Again, if you've got any other resources that you can think of off the top of your head, feel free to put those in the chat. And that's our first E of our algae action plan. The final E of our algae action plan is encouraging self-help and other support strategies. So I want you all to put in the chat, what does self-help look like for you? Whether it's people, I will say, or activities, maybe that's different hobbies, or even organizations or groups. What does self-help look like for you? I'll give you a few minutes to put that for chat as well. Okay, we've got massages, awesome. I wish I was getting a massage soon, nice. Exercise, great. We've got self-care, getting enough sleep, absolutely, making sure that you're getting enough sleep. Eating well, definitely, that's a good one. Having some downtime, taking some time for yourself, absolutely. Self-help, and we've got someone else in here. Self-help for me means research, ongoing for natural remedies in terms of your health, both for mental and physical. Nice. So really taking control of your health. We like that. Got yoga, nice. The meditation. Awesome. Asking for help with day-to-day tasks. Yes. I'm so glad that you feel comfortable enough to be able to say, I need some help and willing to ask for that help. Awesome. Having fun with friends, family, talking to a close friend or a family member. Awesome. I'm glad you have that support group there for you is awesome. Any others from the rest of you? Any other ways that we practice self-help or self-care? Saying no, absolutely. And just letting that be. If we don't have the time for it, we're just not able to do it, just saying no. I like that. Pets are an awesome way to release some stress there. Speaking up with what you need, absolutely. Nice. Great ideas in the chat here. Keep them coming. I think we talked about a lot of these, but it could be exercise, relaxation, some meditation, could be some peer support or different kinds of maybe self-help books or group support, social networks, different hobbies, maybe it's yoga or journaling or cooking or hiking or reading, different family, friends, volunteering. We're religious, maybe it's a faith group, a book club, different kinds of support groups, even like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, you know, any of those also can be a form of self-help as well. I love that we're getting such a wide variety of different ideas. I think it's a nice way to point out that, you know, works maybe for someone, it might not work for everyone. Maybe for me, cooking is my form of relaxation, but other people cooking is really, really stressful, right? So there's no one size fits all. There's a lot of different ways that we can encourage self-help and different support strategies here. Great. Any questions about this algae action plan before I move on to first person language? Any questions? Okay, great. Well, let's talk about first. Will we get a copy of the presentation? Yes, I can absolutely do that. I will send you in the next week or so, you'll get a copy of the recording, and that will have the slides and the recording that you can do. I can send you a PDF as well in that email if you prefer. I'm also more than willing to make a PDF of this, and you can absolutely send you that too. Okay. Absolutely. Okay, first person language. First person language really is a way to put the person before the disability. We're trying to emphasize the person, viewing the condition as really only one part of the whole person. It was originally actually written into law in the American with Disabilities Act, in 1990, and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 1997. However, in more recent years, there's been more of a push of trying to use first person language when we're writing about an addiction or substance use disorders, even like medical diagnoses as well. Really trying to focus on what a person, really that contrast here is like what a person has rather than what a person is. So this is putting that focus on the individual as a person. They've got unique strengths, qualities, and experiences rather than completely defining them just by their diagnosis. Now, I will caveat this before we dive too far into it, that this is not a one size fits all. Some people within different disability communities actually oppose this, and they believe that if language isn't really needed to even separate themselves from others, then that's still considered negative. So there's not a one size fits all. Still important that we talk about it, that when in doubt with someone, you can always just ask, right? They might prefer something else. We can always ask. We're going to give some examples here of what this does and does not look like. Really trying to put this into practice. So instead of, for example, saying the diabetic, we say it's a person living with diabetes, right? We're putting that person first rather than their diagnosis. So these next two here, I'm going to see if we can come up with some new ideas. Instead of calling them an addict or a druggie, let's put in the chat, what else? What can we say instead of that? Instead of saying an addict or instead of saying a druggie? Okay, someone's a person that has an addiction. Okay. Person maybe with a chemical dependence. Okay, getting some good ideas here. So it could be a person with a substance use disorder. Maybe they're in recovery. It's someone in recovery, right? It's not a prior addict, it's someone in recovery. Nice. And then last example here that we'll try, they're retarded. What should we say instead of saying they're retarded? What's a better way to put that person first and make it person first language here? Ideas on this one. Maybe we've got a person with a disability, maybe a person with Down syndrome. Any other ideas? Okay, maybe developmentally, delayed, right? Good ideas there. When we came up with this person with an intellectual or cognitive disability, right? We never want to ever say they're retarded. Yes, absolutely such a slur. Thanks for putting that in the chat. We never want to say that. And even if it's not about someone else, you can say, oh, I messed this up. I'm so retarded. We don't want to say that, right? That's definitely a slur. Thank you for putting that in the chat there as well. Really the idea behind this first person language is just to promote inclusivity. And, again, at the end of the day, we're all people, right? Instead of it's the diabetic. Well, there's so much more than their diagnosis, right? It's a person living with diabetes, but there's still so much more to them. All right. Then finally, I've got just some emergency contact information. I realize that we are talking about some heavy topics here today, and mental health is so important and not talked about enough. So just some different numbers that I'm hoping that we can all use as resources. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 988. They've had this number, if you can see my mouse here, that 1-800-273-TALK has been there for a while. More recently, they've added the 988, so it's an easier number to remember. Just like we do 911 to call for medical emergencies or other emergencies, we can use 988 for the suicide prevention lifeline. You can also visit them at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. We've got resources in Spanish as well. Or you can also text MHFA, so it's mental health first aid, to 741-741 for other crisis counseling as well. So I'm hoping that we're able to use those as resources. And yes, you can call or text that number as well. You don't necessarily have to just call them. All right, awesome. Just some final news for you all here from Province. We've got different programs and classes coming up. Our weight management program is always an enroll anytime. Our diabetes prevention program, we've got our next cohort starting tomorrow. There's only a couple spots left to make sure if you're interested that we enroll in that. And then finally, the one I want to highlight here, if you are interested in learning more about mental health first aid, really want to dive into this in so much more detail. This is just a very brief overview of mental health first aid. Our next class is January 24th at 8 a.m. That's a full day training, really dive into so many of these different topics that I kind of briefly went over today. And then blood pressure self-management next one starting next month on February 6th. So with that, does anyone have any questions about anything that we talked about today? Awesome. Well, I will stay on for the next few minutes. If anyone has any lingering questions, lingering thoughts, things that have come up that you need to ask me. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending here today. Like I said, we'll send out a email in the next week or so that will have a PDF of all the slides and a recording of this as well for you to watch on your own time. Thank you.